Hey guys, welcome to the CHALANTING podcast. Yay, first episode. Okay, so we are going to start with a little introduction into how this podcast is gonna go. At the start of the episode, I'm usually just gonna give like a how are we doing? You know, hello, how are you? My name is. We're also going to do a drink of the episode. It'll usually be tea, but I actually am very sensitive to caffeine, so it won't always be tea. Sorry if you thought it would always be tea. I'm sorry. The other thing that I want to add to this podcast is that I really love music. I love discovering new music and listening to music, and I wanted to add like the song of the week or the song of the episode. Something that, you know, I've been listening to a lot. It doesn't necessarily have to relate to what the episode's about. But yeah, just something I've been listening to lately and why I like it. And then yeah, I would get into the episode and we would, you know, have some fun. But since this is the first episode, it's going to be a bit special since I'm also going to like, you know, talk a little bit more about myself, introduce myself as the host of CHALANTING. So yeah, I'm going to start with the drink of this episode. So because my logo had a matcha latte, we are going to be making a matcha latte. So have my cup, have my matcha. Okay, we're going to do this on camera. Okay. Wait, that looks gorgeous. That looks gorgeous, dare I say. Okay, it's not super green because I actually want to go to sleep tonight. So, fire. It tastes a lot like oat milk, but that's how I wanted it because I want to go to bed. But joke's on me because I probably won't sleep anyway. Also, introducing some friends in my room. These are my frogs. This is Pastel, or my dad likes to call frog number 2. And then this is Sage, my other frog. They are just, you know, peacefully observing today's episode. But they'll always be here in my room. So yeah. Okay, drink of the day is matcha latte. Alright, song of the episode is this song by REBBY called Everything Will Be Okay. I will include it here. Editor Johanna. And basically, it is, or I found REBBY from Patrick Hyzon's album, and she sings a song called Inside, and I got like really obsessed with this song. I also want to MLA cite my housemate and friend Renee for putting me on. MLA citations. But yeah, I looked more into her music and I like love her voice. It's so beautiful. And this song, Everything Will Be Okay, was like honestly really, really helpful to me in recovery because it was like, you know, really motivating and really bright. And I would play it while I did like my physical therapy and stuff. So yeah, I really liked it. It brought me a lot of joy and I hope it brings you some joy too. I forgot to talk about how I was doing. So I'm out of order for this structure, but that's okay because it's first episode and we're chilling. We're just chilling here. So how am I doing? I was thinking we could do like a high and low for each episode. I would say the high was that yesterday I got to hang out with my dear friend Astra. We went to Cover Cafe and I got a matcha latte with caffeine and dairy. I haven't had caffeine and dairy at that point for like 2 weeks. I love caffeine and dairy, but they don't love me. But it was a reward for my low, which was that I had to get my blood drawn. And as many of you guys know, I have like a massive fear of needles. So that was horrifying. But I got it over with. And phobia was demolished. So a win is a win. A win is a win. But yeah, I'm feeling, you know, honestly pretty good. Honestly pretty hyped about this podcast. So yeah, I'm going to try to savor that joy and that excitement. Now, we're going to get into the episode. Now that we got all that out of the way. Episode 1, CHALANTING with Johanna. We're actually going to start though with a little bit more about me, the host of this podcast. So, I'm just going to list some facts about myself, but all of them will be relevant. All of them inform this podcast and like what I have to say. So, I'm 19, #05. I'm Chinese American, 2nd gen. My mom is from Hong Kong. My dad is from Singapore. They both came here when they were teenagers. I live in Palo Alto. I'm from the Bay Area. I like not like identify myself, but like I associate myself with like South Bay, as opposed to like SF. So like, you know, like San Jose, Cupertino, Sunnyvale, Los Altos, Mountain View. And I also go to UC Davis, repping UC Davis, yeah. And I major in Asian American Studies and Sociology. And another thing about me is that I am very emotionally sensitive, very like emotions based instead of thinking based. That's definitely something I'm gonna like get more into with this podcast, because it's definitely like something that kind of inspired it. But I was actually gonna go into my MBTI because I feel like that's pretty interesting. And kind of like gives a basis for like who I am as a person, at least on like the MBTI level. So my MBTI is ENFJ. I don't know if I'm actually going to add any letters there, but ENFJ, okay? And I'm going to break that down. So the E is for extroversion, and I'm just going to read like a description of like what that is. So it says extroverts are interested in engaging with their environment, and they feed off the responses of the people and events around them. They enjoy pushing limits and seeing what the world can do. This all depends on many other factors and life's natural limitations, but extroverted personality types leans towards taking initiative and relying on the world around them for validation. Okay, they didn't have to clock me like that at the end. Okay. Anyway, moving on. The N is intuitive. So people with the intuitive trait prefer to exercise their imaginations as they seek new ideas and possibilities. They live their day-to-day lives just like any other personality type. But while that's happening, their minds tend to point inward while at the same time gently focusing somewhere beyond the horizon. Their lives are ones of questioning, wondering, and connecting the dots in the bigger picture, and they love the theoretical. They often ask what if, and they ponder the possibilities the future might hold. Okay, they got really poetic there, but yeah, intuitive. And then F, people with the feeling trait follow their hearts and emotions, sometimes without even realizing it. They may show it to different degrees and in different ways, but however they do it, the feeling personality types tend to be caring, compassionate, and warm. These concerned people can be highly protective of those who they care about, whether that is in their immediate family or the remote populations in need. Okay, concerned people just like took me out. That's pretty funny. The last one is J, so judging. People with the judging personality trait feel the most comfortable when the course ahead is well marked. They would rather come up with 5 backup plans than deal with events as they come. Okay, very true. Preferring to consider their options ahead of time, personality types with this trait prefer clarity and closure, sticking with the plan rather than just going with the flow. It's as if judging types always keep a mental checklist. Okay, also very true. When they cross something off their list, or even start an item on their list, they consider it complete and not open to reconsideration. Okay, that was pretty serious. But anyway, that's me, ENFJ. A little window into more about what I'm like, if you don't already know those things. I feel like I'm not mysterious. This is the chalanting pod. Like, I feel like this is, you guys already know this. I also wanted to say that, like, I said this in my, like, episode 0, if you watched it and you were an iPad kid, or if you read the caption. But basically, I'm still pretty nervous about this, like, sharing all my thoughts and, like, myself talking, like, on the internet, on, like, a public Instagram and YouTube channel. Like, I'm kind of scared, because, like, what if people I don't like watch it? But at the same time, it's like, I'm not a nonchalant person. Like, I'm not mysterious. Like, they already know from just, like, hearing me talk for, like, 2 minutes. So, like, is there a difference? Okay, yes, there is. But, like, yeah, I already embarrass myself every day. So I might as well just embarrass myself on the internet as a hobby. Anyway, but like I said in the episode 0, I also find it really fun and rewarding to just like share my thoughts and to just yap, and I don't know, I guess it's also a way to connect with people while I'm like recovering too. But I'm also just really excited about it. I don't know, what can I say? I'm just really happy about it. So yeah. Okay, we're finally getting to like the meat of the episode. We're gonna get into the episode. I don't know if I'm just gonna like go point by point or just like let it flow. My hope is to just let it flow, but we shall see what happens. But yeah, you saw the title of the episode, Johanna has social anxiety, friendships, being alone, third spaces, and community. So we're gonna start from the beginning, as in Johanna's childhood. So I don't know, like, if I talk about this that much, but as a kid, I actually didn't have a lot of friends, and I had a really, really hard time making friends. It was probably like the most notable part of my childhood, and the thing that I remember the most is having trouble making friends and being alone. So, like in elementary school, I think I remember having like a few main friends. I have a childhood friend named Catherine. If you're watching, Catherine, shout out, love you. But I remember her as like one of my first friends, and throughout elementary school, I think, yeah, she was like my main friend. And I did have some other friends too, but I remember always having like issues with them. Like, as in, we would stop being friends at some point, or like we would have arguments and stuff. And just like, I wasn't super used to like play dates or like hanging out with my friends all the time. Like, that wasn't something I was really used to. And I would not really spend a lot of time with my friends outside of school, like just socially. Like, I would do extracurriculars and stuff, but I wouldn't like hang out socially with people. And yeah, in middle school, I was also very much like, that was notably when I was the most alone. I like sat by myself for lunch and stuff, and it was really hard for me to like make friends. I did make some friends, but again, they had issues. And I just remember being really, really awkward as a sixth grader and seventh grader. And I found my first like friend group and lunch group in seventh grade, in the middle of seventh grade, because I met this girl in my class and we became friends, and I joined her friend group. And her friend group had some people I knew from band, because I did band as a middle schooler. And I sat with them, and it was the first time where I was like, oh my god, like, I'm in a friend group. This is so weird. This is so foreign to me. Like, I don't, this is so different. And I remember it was just like this big shock of what it meant to have a friend group. And it was only in eighth grade I felt really part of it. And eighth grade was the first time I felt like, I don't want to say the first time I had friends, but the first time I felt like I had a friend group. Like, some, like, people to eat lunch with every day, people to hang out with, and like, especially because of band, like people to hang out with, because we would like, we went on trips together and we did, events together. So that was kind of the first time I was like, oh wow, like I'm finally making friends. I finally feel like I belong a little bit. And going into high school, it was also the same, like that friend group and all that stuff. But I think the point I'm trying to say is, like, I was really used to being alone as a kid, as a middle schooler, as a high schooler. And I remember just not really thinking much of it because that's all I was used to. But there would be times where it was pointed out as like bad. Like, I might get into this in a future episode, but there's this one ex-friend that I had, and I used to bike alone to school every morning and bike home every night, and I didn't, or every after school, not at night, sorry. And I thought there was like no issue with that. I'm like, yeah, I'm just getting to school and back home. And then when I would go home, I would like watch YouTube and then do my homework and then do extracurriculars, I guess, and go to bed. My extracurriculars were like mainly choir. Like, I mainly just did this children's choir for my church. And one time, this ex-friend was like, hey, do you want to bike home with me? Because they lived really close to me. And I was like, yeah, sure. And they were like, yeah, I want to bike with you because I don't want to look sad and alone and look like a loser biking home by myself. And I was like, damn, I bike home by myself every day. I didn't know that was loser activity. I thought that was just normal. And then I suddenly became very self-conscious of it. And I was like, I guess I can't bike alone anymore. So, with those new friends that I made in band and that new friend group, I was like, okay, I'll try to bike with them. But honestly, it was kind of hard to coordinate, so I don't remember biking with them that often. I think maybe in eighth grade, I biked with them like to and from school, like at least every day. But then, before that point, I would try, but like it would just be like a sometimes thing. Anyway, so I didn't think being alone was actually super negative until later, because I would just hang out by myself. Like, I remember distinctly in the summertime, what I would do is I would just hang out in the library. I would go on walks in the park. I would go to Seal Park and swing. I would get quesadillas at Sancho's in Midtown. I would go get boba by myself. I would go see shows by myself. Like, I'll be like, yeah, I want to see like the children's theater show. So I just went by myself. And I thought that was like super fine. And I was pretty happy with it. Wait, I'm going to take a sip of my matcha. But I guess maybe inside I also felt really lonely too. I think I definitely wasn't like, oh, I'm super happy with being alone. Because, like, oh, sorry. I am like an extrovert, right? So I think, and I've always been an extrovert. So I've always, I like being around people and I wanted friends really badly, especially middle school. And I think another big part of it was that I never felt like I belonged. Even if I was around people, I still felt like I didn't belong. Um, Wait, let me bring up a few stories just to like illustrate. I think even in elementary school, I kind of knew I was like not like different, not like I'm not like other girls, but like I was kind of weird, as in like I didn't really fit in with a lot of my peers. And I don't know if that's just because of how I grew up. Like, I don't know if it was because I grew up like pretty religious, like Christian, and like maybe that was part of it, but also a lot of people grew up Christian too. um or maybe it was just because of my personality, or like I just didn't have any understanding of social cues, or like I don't know, I'll get more into it. But I just felt like very different from people. And a distinct a distinct memory from elementary school was I was in Girl Scouts. And and Girl Scouts was with a lot of these people who you would think would be Girl Scouts. Um, a lot of them were white, first of all, which was a big factor, and a lot of them were already friends with each other, and they were in the same class. Wait, another really important part to mention, I was in my elementary school, Loney Elementary, there's a Mandarin immersion program, and I was in the Mandarin immersion program for 6 years. Yeah, for all the years of elementary school. And the Mandarin immersion program is pretty concentrated. There's 2 classes per each grade level. So in Ohlone, it's K and 1, second and third, and then fourth and fifth. So you were with the same people for 6 years. So those were the people I knew. And a lot of these people from Girl Scouts were not in the Mandarin immersion or MI program. They were just in like the normal classes. So they knew each other. They grew up with each other. They're all friends already. And they're this big clique. So when I joined, I already knew I wasn't a part of it because I wasn't in their clique. I also, again, wasn't white. I also wasn't like them. I don't know how else. I just wasn't like them. I didn't like the same things as them. Oh, I cared a lot about Girl Scouts. That was the thing. I cared a lot about Girl Scouts. I was like, I want to learn CPR. I want to learn first aid. I want to learn how to start a fire. Like, I want to do all this Girl Scout stuff because I thought that was cool. Like, leadership is cool. But then a lot of them, like, they wanted from Girl Scouts was like making brownies and hanging out with one another and eating pizza and, that stuff. Socializing. And I was like, no, we gotta lock in. So I think that's why I didn't make any friends there. And I also just felt really excluded. I think also the racial part was also like a big part of it. A lot of them were white, and there were only a few people who weren't white. And I remember that my mom was also really involved, and I felt bad because she was also excluded, kind of as like a Girl Scout leader. My mom made Japanese curry, okay, for dinner. And okay, my mom's Japanese curry is fire. And she made Japanese curry and rice. And I was like, wow, this is great home cooked meal as opposed to Costco pizza. And they were like, ew, what's this? Like, we just want Costco pizza and our dry ass, like, veggie plate. And I'm like, what the? Like, they refused to eat the Japanese curry. And I was like, what the hell? Like, my mom just lovingly made you food. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, Girl Scouts, I felt like an outsider. And I felt like it was a clique that I just could never be part of. Another thing was like, I could just notice that I was like different somehow, like in the way that I thought, the way that I spoke, the way that I dressed, that I just didn't really fit in with my peers. And it definitely made me feel like really bad about myself as a kid. But I also like, also as a kid, I was very like self-righteous and very like, holier than thou energy, which I don't do that anymore. I really hope. Like, I don't condone that. That's my like dark past. I don't want to be like that anymore, obviously. But I also took it like very bitterly. I was like, okay, well, I'm just better than you guys. Sorry, this is embarrassing to say out loud, but yeah, I took it that way. But again, I was also acutely aware that I was different, and it did make me very sad, and like I I just feel like I could never belong. I did feel the same way in high school too. Um, like in specifically in student council, it was kind of the same thing as Girl Scouts, where I joined for the leadership and to better the school, and because I really cared about like student affairs and like student voice and like all that student council jazz, right? And even though I was really involved though, I never felt like I fit in student council. I probably only had like 1 to 2 friends in student council, and I don't know. I just knew I wasn't part of like the main group, and it really, really like I noticed that a lot because it was like junior year. I was like 16 too, so that's like peak. Oh, I don't fit in a high school like moment, right? So I had this. Look, there was one story that I had where it was senior year homecoming, and basically there was a homecoming after party, and basically all the seniors in ASB were in a car and they were going to go to the after party, and they dropped me off at my car, and then I just looked at them and I knew they were all going somewhere without me, and I was like, oh guys, where are you guys going? And they were like, oh, we don't know yet, I don't know. And I was like, okay. And we had this really awkward moment where we both just like looked at each other, and I didn't know what to do because I was like, okay, you're obviously being excluded here. You could either just like go home and like cry, or you could try to be included and then maybe cry later, but then maybe still be included. So I was like, okay. I just kind of kept looking at them, and then one of the seniors, who was like, I would say was my friend in sophomore year when we were in ASB. Another big part about ASB is that a lot of us who were friends in sophomore year, during COVID, once junior year hit and everyone was back, something happened over the summer, I guess, because they just decided to not really like talk to me anymore. Anyway, but one of them was like, oh, why don't I just send you the address and you can meet us there? And I was like, okay. So they sent me the address. I drove there by myself. It was an after party, and I wasn't the type of person to party in high school because I'm just not that. I was never invited. I'm just not that type of person. And I showed up, and I was like, oh my god, where are you guys? And then I think what was happening it was like someone's house. I think the party ended or something like that. And I was like, yeah, where are you guys? And they're like, oh, we left. And I was like, okay. So they basically just sent me an address, made me drive there, and then left and like went to their, I guess, original location or something. Anyway, I feel like that would be a good story for like the candy trauma trend. But anyway, that was a fun story from high school about exclusion. But the whole point of me telling these stories was that I didn't feel really like included as, or like I didn't feel like I belonged for a really long time in my life. And honestly, I sometimes still feel that way. But the unbelonging and feeling excluded happened in like church as well, like my church and in my children's choir and in like basically everything that I did. Like I always felt like even if I had friends, I never felt like I really belonged or I was part of like the bigger group or like the bigger clique, or just like I don't know, I just don't know how to say it. I just never felt like I belonged there. I belonged in any space. Another thing that came out of that though was that I put friendship as like a very high priority in my life. Like it was really, really important to me. And friendship also became something that I didn't see very casually. Like I took it very seriously. And it got it like as in okay, like the way I can explain it is that I wouldn't call someone a friend unless we were like this. Otherwise, like I didn't see people just as like friends or like casual friends. Like classmates, I didn't call them friends because to me, I thought friendship was like this, you know, super magical, important, you know, thing. And I thought you had to be like this to like call people friends. So I was really careful about calling people friend because I didn't know if I could consider them friend. I was also scared to call them friend and they were like, "No, ew, you're not my friend." Um and another thing I also really didn't understand was like how friendship worked. Like that was something that was really really foreign to me as a kid. Like I went to the mall with with the friend group I joined in middle school, and I remember I had no idea what to do. Like I had no idea how to act. And also like the other thing is I didn't really have like money to spend at this mall cuz I was like 13, but a lot of them had like money to spend and they would just buy stuff and try things on. And also they would try things on like in the same room. And I remember being like horrified. I was like, "Wait, we're supposed to like change in the same room?" And I remember I was super uncomfortable with that. I do realize now that there's two factors that kind of played into that. One is that I didn't really have that much money to spend because I think like for clothing specifically, like I never bought clothing full price. I only bought it on sale or like hand-me-downs or like from Marshalls or like TJ Maxx. So I was not really used to like going to malls and just like buying clothes full price. Um the second thing was that I was also like very I mean I still am, but I'm definitely like a lot more aware of like my body just because like I'm not like skinny or anything, and like a lot of these like people that I was friends with were. So again, there was like there were actually differences that did make me feel like I was, you know, different and like couldn't figure things out socially. But also I just wasn't used to hanging out with friends that I didn't understand like how to do it. Um and this goes into the Johanna has social anxiety topic, okay? So I am an extrovert and I would say I'm pretty like bubbly, like loud. I like to make jokes. I like to greet people. I feel like I'm very outgoing. You know, I love talking to people. Well, I we'll get into that. But I'm an extrovert, right? But I also have social anxiety. Like not just like, oh, like you might have social no, I like my therapist was like, you have social anxiety. And I was like, oh, but yeah, I have social anxiety and it is a really big part of my life. And I think it was always there, I think. Now that when I reflect back on it, just like not knowing how to interact with people and like trying and then failing. Like I know like some people with social anxiety are very like reclusive. Like they are just like very shy or they won't speak. Um the way I would describe it is that as an extrovert with social anxiety, I try and then fail and then feel really bad about it. So I'll still do it. I'll still talk and I'll still like put myself out there. I'll just really regret it afterwards and then shame myself for it afterwards. Um or I'll just try and then fail and then like make a fool of myself. So yeah, I do have social anxiety. I think I already described some parts of it, but a lot of it was being very scared to talk to new people. Like very very scared. Like before going to a gathering with new people, I would be very very nervous. It would mean planning ahead a lot. That's very J of me. Literally planning things to say before like a hangout. One-on-one hangouts also with new people would really 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 terrify me because a big part is I also get really scared of silence. Like silence in a conversation really like I can't do it. Like I really can't do any silence at all. Like every, you know, like second of the conversation needs to have talking or something, or else I will like literally go insane. um it's also like just feeling super aware of every social interaction, like super aware of what I'm saying, the inflections, how I'm saying it, what I look like, what I'm dressed like, and then being super aware of what they're saying, and then just being super aware of like the whole environment and everything. And um I think it's also like with conversations, it's feeling very aware of like what I'm saying, how I'm saying it. And then a big part of like my brain with conversations is that I kind of treat it like an ASB agenda. Like okay, this is point A, B, and C. This is sub point 1, 2, and 3. We had to make sure we have equal time between each person in this conversation, make sure we hit all the points. If we go off topic, we had to go back to this point. We can table this point for later. like, like I don't try to treat conversations like ASB, but I think of conversations sometimes very in a very structured way. And then if it like goes off flow, I'm like, wait, let's get back to this point. um so anyway, social anxiety and going to college. That is where I also found out like how intense and how bad my social anxiety was, because oh, college, you're going to a place with a bunch of people who are your age and you don't know anybody and you have to make friends. Like, ultimate challenge for a person with social anxiety, right? And I was terrified to go to college and meet new people and make new friends. Again, I would do things like I would talk to people, I would go to events and stuff. I would just be really nervous to the point of like throwing up and then come back and then ruminate about how it all went wrong. So another thing I did is I would, like plan ahead. Like I literally going to college, I planned out like questions to ask people, like get to know you questions, and I had a list of questions. And my plan, my idea with this was that if I ever ran out of things to say, I would just ask like one of the questions on the get to know you questions to like keep the conversation going. The other strategy I had was that if I didn't know what to say, I would just lore drop. Like I would just tell people stories from my high school and like overshare. Like, okay, maybe that's just like getting to know people and like that's how you make friends. But I just was like, oh, I'll just tell them traumatic things from ASB in high school. Like that, that would be funny. Like literally in orientation, I like literally just told all these people that I just met about how I sprained my ankle the day before prom in senior year. And that was a very traumatic moment in my life, but I just like told them. Yeah, so I don't know. I think it was just really hard, especially freshman year, going to these events, trying to make friends, trying to understand how to keep friends and stuff like that. But I also like watched all these TikTok videos before freshman year, and they were like how to make friends in college, what not to do, canon events, freshman canon events. And one thing I was really scared of was making like surface level friends and then just like forgetting about them. And I will say that's just like kind of what comes with freshman year of college. But I was also really scared of like having a friend group and then having it fall apart. Like that's like a canon event, or making fake friends, and like acting like so different that I make friends I don't like and making toxic friendships. I will say for the most part I avoided most of those because I just didn't have a friend group. Really, I mean, I will say like my orientation people, but like I feel like they were like, orientation friends, right? And I don't think I made any toxic friends. At least not until later. But I think I was trying to be really intentional about making good friends and trying to like be myself. So I made friends who like just accepted me for who I was. But I also, as someone with social anxiety, did feel really bad all the time about how I was and how I acted. And because I had trouble making friends in the first couple in like the first quarter and fall quarter, I just thought that I'm like, oh wow, I guess everyone just hates my personality. And like I'm just like, I don't know, like everyone just hates who I am, hates my personality. And at the end of fall quarter, I remember being like really sad because I was like, damn, like I guess I failed, especially since like I was comparing myself to other people and being like, wow, everyone else is like having a great time integrating into college life and making friends and having a community, and I don't have that. So I think that was another really big part of it. I will say, I think I was definitely being hard on myself because when you think about it, finding a community in college is not necessarily easy. There's a lot of people who don't, and I think as a freshman, I just assumed that like literally every single UC Davis freshman had a community except for me. And I just thought there was something wrong with me because of that. And I had social anxiety too. I need to drink my matcha. It's like melting. Matcha break. Okay. But yeah, that was definitely a really hard time in my life and really challenged me a lot. Because yeah, it was definitely a dark time in my life. I will talk more about this though in the next episode, so stay tuned. Or the next couple episodes, because it's definitely something that like inspired me to even kind of do this podcast, was like a lot of my experiences for freshman year, because they're definitely very like pivotal in like my self-identity and like what I've learned and stuff like that. But another thing I did want to bring up too was like how kind of all these experiences did shape how I think. The experience of inclusion and exclusion and feeling like I didn't belong and you know, all that sort of stuff. So I think one thing I do appreciate is that this might be social anxiety, but I like to think of it as just being like more intentional and like kind of having an eye for inclusivity. At least I don't want to like gas myself up too much, but like I feel like from my experiences of feeling excluded growing up and just being like really sensitive to that, I definitely have an eye for just trying to make sure people feel included as much as possible. Like that's definitely something I always want to bring when I am at a social gathering, or you know, when I'm around other people, or even when I just have conversations with people. I really want people to feel like heard and included. And the reason why like I even realized that this was something I did and something good was that one of my good friends, we were like talking in the car, and she was like, and I was kind of telling her about this sort of stuff about like feeling like kind of excluded, because she also had similar experiences feeling like she wasn't really fitting in with her friend group. And she said, you know, Johanna, something I really like notice about you and like I really admire about you is that you're always looking out to make sure people feel included. Like especially me, like you always make sure that like, you know, I can make it to the hangout even though you know, I'm on semester system and you guys, some of you guys are on quarter system, and you always make sure I'm part of the group chat. You always make sure that if I'm saying something, I'll be like, oh, what were you saying again? Like, please tell, like, say more. Especially because, like, this friend kind of joined our friend group a little bit later, but I mean, she's great, so it's awesome. And she was like, yeah, I feel like you really have an eye to make sure everyone feels included, and that's really special. And I was like, oh my god, like, it definitely made me reframe things. Like, obviously, it wasn't great being excluded or, like, having those experiences as a kid, but it also made me, like, really happy that through those experiences, I'm able to make sure other people don't feel excluded, because I know what it's like to be excluded. So I know like where those things happen, and I'm able to like be more aware of that and then try to change that and kind of do what I wish other people would have done for me. Um so I guess in that way, again, I don't know if that's social anxiety speaking or like that hyper awareness, or maybe I'm just like so inclusive. Like I don't know, that was definitely something that kind of changed my perspective and made me feel like, wow, this is actually a strength of mine, that I'm able to use those experiences of being excluded and kind of bring that to help more people feel included. Okay, so my entire clip got deleted, so I have to re-record this part. Anyway, learning new things with podcasts. So I'm gonna try my best to redo it, but I think I did so well the first time. Anyway, it's okay. But something I didn't get to talk about that I wanted to include in this podcast was about finding community at college. Obviously, I'm going to college for my degree. I want my Bachelor of Arts, my BA in Asian American Studies and Sociology. Okay, I'm not paying tuition for funsies. Okay, I want my education. Higher education is good. Okay, but a big goal of mine going to college was that I really wanted to find a community and I really wanted to belong. Like all those stories, right? Like for a really long time in my life, I didn't belong. And I was talking to a family friend. This is like before I went to Davis, and he was telling me about his community at Georgia Tech, which is where he went to college. And he was in this Asian Christian fellowship. And he told me that they had a really, really strong community. Like they would just spontaneously get food together at like 10 p.m. Then they would you know, after church, go out to eat. And he was like, yeah, we went out to eat like every time after church. All 50 of us would go to a restaurant, and we literally revived like small businesses like that were dying from COVID because we went so often, and we just like all 50 of us would go and eat there. And it was really sweet to hear about that. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds incredible. I really, really want that in college for myself. Especially because like, especially with like faith spaces. I never really felt like I belonged in church either. In church spaces. Like, I don't want to get too much into it, but the church that I grew up in was mainly white, but my parents were in this fellowship at the church called Common Need, and that fellowship was mostly Chinese and Asian, and then they were also known as like the most like inclusive one. I think it's just because like we had a lot of community values, and like we, you know, invited people who were like recent immigrants or who just needed like a community, stuff like that. And it was a pretty strong community too. But we were like physically segregated from like the other fellowships. Oh, and you know, also like racism and sex. Like there was racist people in my youth group. There was just like this full-on Trump supporter, and like when we went to summer camps, we were like we being like the Asian youth were like the only Asian people. We were called the Asian invasion, and like, oh, and yeah, like pre-COVID, or like when COVID was first, you know, the cases first started popping up in the US, February 2020. They were like, Chinese people eat bats, Chinese people eat rats, and I was like moment of silence, because I don't even remember what I said, but yeah, I didn't feel included at my church. I felt like I didn't belong there. Even though I was very involved, I just never felt like I truly belonged. I never felt like I had real friends. I literally didn't hang out with people in church outside of church. Like, do you want to hang out socially? Actually, no, we never did. Maybe not until like literally like after I graduated high school, like, or senior year is where I like, again, okay, and I would talk to them, right? Like there'd be people that I would talk to, but we weren't like friends, okay? All that to say is I didn't really feel like I belonged at church, or I belonged to the Christian space. And I guess it really made me think like, oh, like do I even belong as a Christian? Like, and will I even be accepted as in this church space? Like, it definitely made me feel like, I don't know, maybe Christianity is just not for me or something. But that's why in college I really, really wanted to find a fellowship in a church space that I felt like I could belong at. And when I got to Davis, I ended up joining, like, long story short, I ended up joining a fellowship that my third cousin was part of, and she just graduated Davis. And I didn't explore other fellowships because I didn't know anyone else at Davis. And I didn't know you could explore them. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know how many fellowships there were. I didn't know to explore them. I just stuck with that one because I was like, okay, I know someone here. We're good. And I tried really hard to be part of that fellowship. I tried for a quarter, fall quarter, and half of winter quarter. And I made 0 friends. I made 0 friends in that fellowship. But I tried really hard. Okay? And you remember the 100 questions things, or like the list of questions and like the social anxiety? Yeah, all of that was there, okay? I would be really nervous going to these social events. I would try really hard to talk to people, make friends, and it would just fail. Like, I would be in a car with like these other freshmen, and we would be driving to, you know, an event, and I'd be like trying to chat it up with people, and they would just be, go girl, give us nothing, and I would be like, okay, I'm just gonna die in this car then. I'm just never gonna speak again. And just like massive oral loss. And at this fellowship, I also just felt like I couldn't be myself. I really just feel like I couldn't be myself. Like, even just being an Asian American Studies major, like, I just felt like even that just made me different. And it sucked because like that's like my my passion. Graphic design is my passion, but like it's really important to me, okay? And it's a big part of myself, but I feel like I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't, you know, be myself. And I feel like I had to be someone I wasn't. But even being someone I wasn't, I still didn't make friends. So even if I was like being myself or being someone I wasn't making friends. I wasn't feeling included. Like, sure, I was friendly and I like knew these people, but like I was not friends with them. Same with like how it was at church. Like I knew them, but we did not hang out socially. And I just didn't think we clicked. And I kept waiting for like to find someone that I could click with, and it just didn't happen. And I just thought I just needed to try harder. I thought it was just like, okay, I'll just try harder. So, you know, winter quarter, I tried even harder. And I actually just went through lots of different instances of just feeling excluded and just feeling like I didn't belong. And like I'll go through a few of them, but like I went on the winter retreat and I was basically third wheeling these two girls who were friends. They're also both white. And I also got publicly injured in that winter retreat, and I couldn't even tell, and it was bad, okay? And I couldn't even tell them it was bad. They were like, oh, so like, how was it? And I was like, oh, haha, it was so good. No, it wasn't. Like, I couldn't even be honest with these people. And then I just always felt like they were like making fun of me, or like they didn't like my personality, or like they would just make comments that would tell me that I was different. And like the final straw that like made me just be like, I quit, was that they were like, oh, it was this the Friday before. They were like, oh, Johanna, like, are you gonna go with the freshman girls ice skating on Monday? And I was like, oh, what are you guys talking about? I was just like not added to the group chat. Like they just didn't invite me until just then. But they thought I was already invited, but I wasn't. But that wasn't even the part I was most upset about. Like, I guess they did just invite me in that moment, and I could have gone, but I had plans already, and I would have gone, and I would have not made plans on that Monday if you had told me earlier. But I was more upset about the fact that they, first of all, didn't invite me earlier, like everyone else, and everyone else knew except for me, which made me feel really stupid. But I was more upset about the fact that they didn't care that I was upset about it. Like, I was, like, visibly upset. I was like, oh, like, I didn't know about it, like, and then no one cared. Everyone was just, like, doing their own thing. And I was like, oh, these people literally don't care about me as a person. Like, they might care on the surface, but they don't care about me as a person. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, I'm gonna quit. So I just stopped going. And I ended up joining another fellowship, actually. And a lot of you guys who are watching this are from InterVarsity, but I ended up joining InterVarsity. But I came into InterVarsity with all this fellowship trauma. And I still have social anxiety, right? So with social anxiety and fellowship trauma. So just social anxiety times 100, okay? And I remember the first couple of weeks I was really, really nervous. And I was a lot more shy and reserved, which is kind of strange for me because I'm usually not shy or reserved. And I just remember, like, just feeling so scared that would happen again. But spoiler, it did happen in some instances. I won't get too much into it because it's getting kind of long. But I did get to the point where I did feel like I could be myself. And I was so relieved that I could just, like, be myself, and people liked that, and people wanted to talk to me. And I actually, like, made real friends, and that was just so relieving. Because I was like, oh my god, at this other fellowship, none of that happened, you know? And obviously, like, things aren't perfect. I'm not gonna be like, oh, happy ending, like, we're all good, we're chilling. You know, the social anxiety stuff is not cured, and, like, you know, the belonging stuff is still, like, a journey, okay? Like, that's definitely still something that is going on for me, or that it's still happening in my life. But I will say, I got to a point in InterVarsity where I was like, oh my god, like, for the first time in my life, I do feel like I belong. Like, I feel like people want me here. People want to talk to me. People see me for who I am and not for a surface level or a fake person, or, like, you know. And, like, kind of another moment that, like, really, like, solidified that was that before I left Davis for my surgery, Beth, who's, like, our leader in IV, hey Beth, she gave me this, like, journal, and it was, like, a bunch of people in IV had written prayers and affirmations and encouragement for me. Yeah, I'd write under my nose. Like, I'm just really oblivious. I had no idea. And I literally cried upon receiving it. I literally, first 5 seconds, I was like, oh my god! But it just made me realize, I was like, wow, for the first time in my life, I feel included. I feel like I belong here. Like, I have a place here. And, you know, like, I literally do have a place. Like, I'm actually in leadership now, and I do outreach and social media. And I have a purpose. Like, can use that experience that I had being excluded to make sure, and that fellowship trauma, to make sure that other people don't feel that way, and to make people feel included, and to help build that community. So I am part of that community, and people see me as a big part of InterVarsity, and people are like going to miss me. And I was like, oh my god, like for the first time in my life, is this what it's like to be included? Like, that's crazy. But yeah, that was definitely a really beautiful moment, I feel like, and like milestone for me. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that too, because I feel like it was a really important part of like my like life and like brain development, and definitely that experience also really inspired me to like do this podcast too. I wanted to transition and talk about the sociology aspect of this, the societal aspect of this. And I did kind of bring this up in my experiences, but there are a lot of factors in society that contribute to unbelonging in both a relational way, right? Like in my experiences with friends and growing up, and also like in a larger scale societal way. Like, who is excluded in the society? Who is the dominant society? Like, who is the clique, right? Who isn't part of the clique? And this is obviously because of like, oppression and how different groups are marginalized, right? Like, some things that I mentioned were like, being Asian in a white space made me feel like I didn't belong. Being in a bigger body made me feel like I didn't belong. Or, okay, I don't want to say that I don't want to imply that I am, like, have less money because I live in Palo Alto, but, like, okay, in that example, not being able to buy clothes or buying cheaper clothes made me feel like I didn't belong. But yeah, like, societally, if you think about it, those things like your race, your gender, your body size, your money, like how much money you have, your income, your background, your education level, your sexuality, all those things are factors for exclusion. And obviously a lot of people from marginalized identities have stories about being socially excluded because of those things. And that also just happens societally, right? Like in employment and, in other institutions like education, right? That exclusion happens. And, if you think about like Jim Crow, that's literally how it was. Literal exclusion, literal segregation, right? If you are a person of color, you just can never be part of the dominant white supremacy society. That's just how it works. Same with like being a woman or being a woman of color, and then all those intersections and intersectionality, right? So that is how our society is built, right? Who is part of the club, who is not part of the club. And even within marginalized identities, there's even more like cliques that happen, right? Like within, Asian people, right? There's still more intersections of who is like the right Asian person, who belongs to that group. And this, also just translates to how other like institutions work, like applications and like incarceration, for example. That's a big example of like who doesn't belong in this society. How are we going to put them away, right? How are we just going to hide them? Those who are unhoused, how are they not included? How are they, not accepted? Whose voices are not heard? Whose opinions are not considered, right? All those things also just tie into like, those are the macro level things that influence the micro level, friendships, belonging, who feels like they can be in this society. And in my social policy class, we learn about like values for social policy, and one of them is I'm trying to remember what it was. It was in my essay. It was, I think, social safety net, and it was this idea, I think it was social safety net. It's this idea that's like, those who are on the sidelines and margins of community deserve to have support, and they deserve to be caught in the social safety net so they can be back integrated and belong in the community. And that's why social policies for those who are unemployed or unhoused, or who, don't have access to food, or who need to escape abuse and all those things, or like refugees, like that's why those things should exist based on that value, is because they are marginalized and excluded from society, and they deserve to belong to and have the same like respect and dignity as everyone else and not be on those margins anymore. So I think that also like informs a lot of my values and just general values for community. I think when it comes to like social justice and political things, um I'm not saying that people don't think this. A lot of people think this, but something that I wish people thought of more is that politics is not meant to be like, or like being involved in politics or like social issues is not meant to be this like super divisive, like hard, like no relationships, like antithetical to friendships and personal life. I think it's very integrated with personal life. And that's why like I made this podcast, right? I think it's like very, very integrated together because a lot of the values that come with just like friendships and belonging are the values that we want, that at least with me, like I want to see in the world, and a lot of people want to see in the world, right? Like I'm going to include my friend in this gathering because I want them to feel included. Maybe they like didn't feel that inclusion before due to, you know, being marginalized, etc, whatever, right? So, you know, inclusion is a big part of that. Even in like, I don't know, InterVarsity events, making sure there's food that is inclusive to people, food that is, you know, tastes like home for them, or, you know, vegan, vegetarian, gluten-free, like just stuff like that. It makes people feel included. It makes people feel like they belong and that they aren't like weird or different and that their needs are also met. And their needs are also important. And then when it comes to larger scale, that's like, how do we make sure that our government's providing social services for all people that attunes to their needs and make sure that they don't feel like they're excluded, that make sure that they get their needs met, and, you know, isn't marginalizing them and oppressing them and excluding them, right? And just to like, just tie all those things together. Therefore, inclusion, belonging, community, those daily interactions with people that seem like micro and personal, that is very political to me. Like building a community, that is so important for reaching those goals of like those political / social justice goals, is just building that community on a local scale, on a small scale in your everyday life. And I think like one like big value that I have is that for those who have the same like values as me, you know, progressive values, who want to see like liberation and change and you know, that sort of support in government and in the world, I think that starts with your relationships and friendships and how we treat our local community. Like that's at least what I believe in, and I think those things are very intertwined. Another thing I wanted to talk about was just like how important relationships and good relationships are and friendships are in society. I don't have like the stats for this, but a lot of people who are not in like healthy relationships or don't have like social safety nets, first of all, they turn to things that are really unhealthy for them, their own wellness, right? Like substances and whatnot. But it also can lead to doing a lot of harm. Like in a very extreme examples, okay, like school shootings, school shooters, okay, or domestic violence, or again, misogyny and upholding those things. Those are very extreme examples. But basically, the epidemic of loneliness, that's also something that's like really coming up with, you know, COVID and everything. That also really impacts society because it impacts how people are interconnected, how people care about each other, and that is what makes up society, right? How people relate to one another. So if we're in a place in society where friendships are like, you know, not considered as important enough, I think they are, but they're not like happening as much, and people are struggling with friendships, people are struggling with building that community, people are losing those communities, especially due to COVID, right? That causes a lot of breakdown in society. That causes a lot of breakdown politically, or just like generally, right, in our society. Because if people aren't feeling connected to each other, they can't rely on each other, they can't rely on their neighbors, they can't rely on their friends, then it's like they don't have people. And that's again how marginalization and that like falling through the cracks stuff also happens, right? When people don't have other people to talk to and rely on. And obviously, I think that's why we should have like services in the government and stuff, because those things can happen. Tragedy happens. Like I'm not saying like, oh, everyone must have friends, so we shouldn't have any social services. But like, that's why those social services matter. But you know, a lot of people get to that point of feeling, they lack needs and stuff because they lack those relationships. And a lot of times that lack of relationships, I'm not saying it's their fault, happens because of societal factors. I hope all of this is making sense, by the way. I think the last thing I want to talk about was a little bit less serious, a little bit more just like, a little less serious, okay, is third spaces. So I think a lot of people have been talking about third spaces, but the idea of a third space is that there's your school or work, so like where you go out in the day to like learn or like make money or whatever you're living, and then your home. Obviously, this is just like a generalized idea of like their two spaces. And the third space is a place outside of those two places. And it's usually where people build connections. And it's usually where people are able to find a community. So for some people, that is the church. For some people, that is a club or extracurricular. For some people, it's a cafe or the library. It's a place that they spend time at that isn't school, work, or home. And a lot of people on the internet, me too, talk about the decline of third spaces or the fact that a lot of third spaces now require money. Okay, like think about it. If you want to hang out with the chingus, you're like, okay, let's get boba. And everyone has to spend $6 to $8 on boba and then find seating in the small boba cafe. And then they're like, oh crap, where do we go now? It's super cold. If we want to go to a next place that's indoors, we had to pay more money. And everyone's like, no. Or you could just be annoying and then buy nothing or buy one thing and then spend 5 hours in like the meat fresh or something. I've done that before. Or like, I don't know. Then you had to go to someone's house, okay, to like hang out. And those things are hard to coordinate. Like people have parents, whatever. It's hard. It's hard to hang out without spending money is the idea. There are places like, parks and libraries. And when I was in middle school, that's where I go. Parks and libraries, easy and free. But there's still a decline of those things. It's still hard. It's still hard to meet up with your friends without spending money. And it's a lot of people are losing those third spaces, especially since like, I guess like generally trend wise, less people are going like use churches as a third space, which is valid. And there's also, like, I think because of COVID too, the loss of those third spaces, like clubs and community centers. And it's also about, like, how society and, like, when I say society, I mean, like, governments, local governments decide to fund third spaces, such as, like, free sports centers or, like, gyms or community centers are a big part, right? Like, do cities fund their community center? Can you go there for free? Do they have community events? Do they have local events? I think I'm very blessed because at least for Palo Alto, they have really strong funding for like library events and community things. And there's a lot of free things you can go to. Like when I was younger, or when I was in high school, I went to Teen Arts Council, and they had like open mics and stuff. So those are like free events that you can go to. And then, at my school, I was in ASB, so I helped plan events too, and create those third spaces for, Palo students. And I would say, college is like a prime example of a third space. You do have to pay for it, actually. You do have to pay for tuition for it. It's not free. But once you're there, there's a lot of free third spaces, right? Like that's why dorm life is so conducive to building relationships. You have like the common room, right? You have the dorm lounge, you have the coho, you have the quad, you have all these places that you can just hang out for free without having to arrange or park or pay, like drive, and you can just like hang out. Obviously, now that a lot of us have moved off campus, like second years after freshman year, it's like a lot harder, and then we're kind of feeling the effects of not having that accessible third space. But like, for most, American college students, that third space is like the dorm, the DC, the, classrooms, just campus, right? So I think that's also a big part of that contributes to like why it's a lot harder to like maintain those relationships and be with friends. And actually with technology, I feel like it obviously has become easier to reach out to people, especially people who are far away. But at the same time, it's also hard because sometimes it means that in-person like interactions are taken for granted. I think obviously after COVID, a lot of people, really do prioritize in-person things. But it also just kind of like, I feel like the wide availability that comes with technology actually makes it so that people hang out less. Like, they're like, oh, you're always there. So it's not like before, you know, cell phones where it's like, oh, like we should see each other, like running into each other, having those conversations and stuff. But yeah, I guess I'm kind of just rambling and yapping at this point. I actually lost my train of thought, but you know, in connection to that, I just wanted to connect all of that to society, and I always feel like that's really important to do because we live in a society, we don't live in a vacuum, and my experiences, as you know, personal as they are also, you know, a result of public life as well. Don't fear if you want to hear about any of these other things more in depth. We have more episodes coming. This episode's already like an hour long. Like, damn, like I yapped. But yeah, I hope you liked this first episode of Chalanting Pod. It's definitely the first episode, so this is like the test run, okay? This is actually just the test episode. Surprise. But I hope you liked it, and I appreciate you for coming along on the ride. I didn't even finish my matcha. Like, I was yapping so hard. I didn't even finish my matcha. This is a lesson to learn. Next time when I make a drink, I'm gonna make a lot less and drink it beforehand. But yeah, thank you for joining the Chalanting Pod. Stay tuned for more episodes, my fellow Chalanters. And yeah, I hope you have the best sleep of your life tonight and the best day of your life today. Okay, peace out.